I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't start without me.
So, that's where your happiness comes from?
Mom, I just got home.
Give me your phone. Lily, now. Movie night at Maya's house. So instead of fixing your grades, you're planning another outing?
It's just for a few hours.
A few hours! Your mathematics dropped from an A to a C. Chemistry B to D. English barely passed.
Sometimes, the biggest battles aren't fought in public. They happen behind the front door of a home that looks perfectly normal from the outside. At 18 years old, Lily Johnson had mastered one thing better than anyone around her: pretending she was okay. Every afternoon, she'd walk through that front door wearing the same tired smile. A smile that fooled almost everyone. Almost. Today had been one of the few moments she had genuinely laughed. Just a few minutes with the people who made the heavy days feel lighter. A simple conversation, a few jokes, a promise to meet later that evening. For most teenagers, it was nothing special. For Lily, it was something she desperately needed. As her phone buzzed in her hand, her face softened. For the first time all day, the tension in her shoulders disappeared. She quickly replied, "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't start without me." But before she could even slip her phone back into her pocket, everything changed. Her mother was already waiting. Grace Johnson had been standing silently in the dining room, watching every smile, every text, every second. And to her, those smiles had become the enemy. She didn't see a daughter finally finding comfort. She saw distraction, failure, a future slowly slipping away. The report cards on the dining table had already convinced her of one thing: someone had to be blamed. And in Grace's mind, she had already found the answer. Parents often believe they can recognize the people who influence their children. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they couldn't be more wrong. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house. Outside stood three familiar faces.
Maya.
The confident one who always knew the right thing to say.
Ethan.
Quiet, respectful, the type of teenager teachers trusted instantly. And Zoe, the cheerful friend whose laughter could brighten almost any room. None of them knew what had happened inside the house only moments earlier. They had simply come to pick up their friend for a quiet movie night. Homework had already been completed. Snacks had already been bought. The evening had been planned for weeks. But before any of them could explain, Grace's cold expression told them everything. The answer had already been decided. The conversation they hoped would last only seconds became something none of them would ever forget. Every polite explanation was met with another wall. Every attempt to reassure her only strengthened her belief. To Grace, these weren't good children. They were the reason her daughter was falling behind. And she intended to end their friendship before it ruined Lily's future completely. Some goodbyes happen slowly. Others happen in a single sentence. Lily stepped toward the doorway. The tears in her eyes hadn't fallen yet, but Maya noticed them immediately. Friends notice the things parents sometimes miss. No words were needed, just one look, one silent plea. "Please, don't make this worse." Maya understood. She swallowed everything she wanted to say, because the truth wasn't hers to tell. When Grace announced that Lily would never spend time with them again, the words landed like a thunderclap. No calls, no messages,
No visits. No friendship.
just like that. Years of memories, study sessions, birthday parties, late-night phone calls, moments of laughter, moments of tears, were erased with a single decision. Ethan stood frozen. Zoe looked as though she might cry. Maya wanted to fight for her friend, because she knew something Grace didn't. She knew the real reason Lily's grades had fallen. She knew why Lily had become quieter every week. She knew why Lily rarely smiled anymore. She knew that those grades were only a symptom, not the problem. She almost told the truth. Almost. But one desperate look from Lily stopped her. Some secrets aren't hidden because people are ashamed. Sometimes they're hidden because they're afraid of hurting the people they love. Grace saw only silence. She mistook it for guilt. What she couldn't see was that every one of those teenagers was protecting Lily, not themselves. As they slowly walked away, Maya turned around one last time. She didn't say a word. She simply mouthed, "Stay strong." 3 simple words. But they carried more comfort than anyone inside that house realized. The front door slammed shut. And with it, Lily's world became just a little smaller. Sometimes love makes people protective. Sometimes it makes them blind. Grace picked up Lily's phone. To her, every notification represented another distraction. Another reason for unfinished homework. Another excuse. One by one, she deleted every connection.
Maya, gone. Ethan, gone. Zoe, gone.
Entire conversations disappeared with a tap of her finger. Years of memories, photos, jokes, words of encouragement, gone in seconds. Lily watched helplessly. It felt as though pieces of her life were being erased while she stood there unable to stop it. She begged, quietly at first, then desperately. But Grace truly believed she was doing the right thing. Every sacrifice she'd made, every overtime shift, every sleepless night working to pay school fees, played over and over in her mind. She wasn't trying to punish her daughter. She believed she was saving her. When Lily almost revealed the truth, the only people who, she stopped herself. Fear won again. Grace heard defiance. But hidden beneath those unfinished words was a cry for help. One she couldn't hear. The rules were simple now. School, home,
Study, sleep. No distractions.
no friends.
No exceptions.
Grace believed discipline would solve everything. She had no idea. She had just taken away the very people holding her daughter together. Some people cry loudly. Others become experts at crying in silence. The moment Lily closed her bedroom door, the mask disappeared. She locked it, not because she feared someone would come in, but because she couldn't let anyone see her falling apart. She slowly slid down the wall until she reached the floor. Her breathing became uneven. She pressed both hands over her mouth, trying to stop the sobs from escaping. She had become very good at suffering quietly. After several minutes, she reached beneath her bed. Hidden where no one would ever think to look
Was an old notebook.
its cover was worn, its corners bent, its pages stained by tears that had dried long ago. This wasn't homework. It wasn't a diary anyone was meant to read. It was the only place where Lily allowed herself to be honest. Every page began the same way. Things I couldn't tell Mom. Page after page. Week after week. Month after month. Every fear. Every sleepless night. Every silent breakdown. Every burden she carried alone. The notebook knew the version of Lily that no one else had ever seen. Her trembling hand opened to a fresh page. Tears blurred her vision as she picked up her pen. She whispered every word while writing them down. Today she took away the only people who knew I wasn't okay. The camera slowly pulled back, revealing page after page covered in tear stains. A painful reminder that Lily's story hadn't started today. She had been silently asking for help for a very long time, but no one had noticed. Not yet. Morning arrived, but it didn't bring peace. The Johnson home, once filled with weekend conversations and the smell of breakfast shared with laughter, now felt painfully quiet. Only the gentle sizzle of pancakes on the stove broke the silence. Grace had barely slept. She replayed yesterday's argument over and over in her mind, convincing herself she had done what any responsible mother would do. Children don't always understand discipline. Parents have to make the hard decisions. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. She glanced toward the staircase every few seconds, waiting for Lily to come downstairs. When Lily finally appeared, she looked nothing like the cheerful girl who had left for school the day before. Her oversized hoodie swallowed her small frame. Her eyes were swollen from hours of crying. Even walking down the stairs seemed to take effort. Still, she smiled. Not because she was happy, but because she didn't want another argument. Grace placed breakfast on the table. Fresh pancakes. The kind Lily used to love. She hoped food might fix what words couldn't. Instead, Lily only stared at the plate. Every bite felt impossible. Her stomach wasn't empty. Her heart was. Grace noticed immediately. But instead of seeing heartbreak, she saw resistance. She encouraged Lily to eat. She reminded her that studying required energy. She believed determination was the answer. Lily quietly whispered, "I'm trying." Those 3 words carried far more meaning than Grace realized. Lily wasn't only trying to improve her grades. She was trying to keep herself together.
Trying not to cry.
Trying not to disappoint her mother. Trying not to let the loneliness swallow her whole. Grace answered with 2 simple words. Try harder. Neither of them knew it then, but they were speaking 2 completely different languages. One spoke about school. The other was silently asking for help. Hours passed. Textbooks covered Lily's desk. Mathematics.
Chemistry.
Physics. Pages filled with equations stared back at her. Normally, she could solve them without much effort. Today, the numbers refused to make sense. Not because she had forgotten how, but because her mind was somewhere else entirely. Grief has a way of making even the simplest tasks feel impossible. She tried reading the same sentence again, and again, and again. Nothing stayed in her mind. Then, her phone vibrated. A tiny sound, yet it immediately pulled her back to the present. Unknown number. Her pulse quickened. She opened the message. "We're worried about you. Meet us at the old library at 4. Please." Lily couldn't help it. A small smile appeared. It was the first genuine smile she'd managed since everything fell apart. Her friends hadn't forgotten her. They were still looking for her. Still trying to reach her. Still reminding her. She wasn't alone. She had barely begun typing a reply when the bedroom door swung open without warning. Grace stepped inside. One glance at Lily's face was enough. She saw the smile, but she misunderstood its cause. Once again, she asked for the phone. Once again, Lily hesitated. Not because she wanted to hide bad behavior, but because she feared losing the last thread connecting her to the people who understood her. Grace read the message aloud. She heard concern, but interpreted it as temptation. She believed they were inviting Lily to waste another afternoon. Lily gathered every ounce of courage she had left. "They've just been helping." Those words hung in the room, so close to the truth, yet still hiding it. Grace shook her head. "They're helping you fail." With one tap, the message disappeared, as though deleting the words could erase the friendship behind them. Lily watched in silence. Sometimes heartbreak doesn't come from shouting. Sometimes it comes from realizing someone refuses to understand you. As Grace walked away carrying the phone, Lily slowly sank to the floor. The tears came quietly, not because she had lost a message, but because she was beginning to wonder if anyone would ever believe her. Across town, 3 teenagers waited. The afternoon sun slowly drifted across the sky. 3 drinks sat untouched on the picnic table. One had already begun to lose its ice. It had been bought especially for Lily. No one wanted to admit it, but each passing minute made hope a little harder to hold on to. Zoe checked her phone again. Nothing. Ethan stared at the empty chair. Nothing. Maya looked down the street one more time. Still nothing. They knew Lily. She would never ignore them without a reason. Something was wrong. They could all feel it. Fear settled over the table. Not fear that she no longer wanted to be friends. Fear that she couldn't reach them. That she was facing something alone. The silence reminded them of another day, months earlier, when Lily had looked at all 3 of them with tears in her eyes and whispered words they would never forget. "Promise me something. No matter what happens, don't give up on each other." Back then, they hadn't fully understood why she needed that promise. Today, they understood a little more. Together, they quietly repeated those words. "No matter what happens, we don't give up on each other." It wasn't just a promise anymore. It was a decision. They would find a way to help their friend,
No matter how difficult it became.
Back at the Johnson home, life appeared ordinary. Grace folded freshly washed clothes while the television played quietly in the background. For a brief moment, everything felt normal again. Then the house phone rang. It was a call she never expected. The school counselor. At first, Grace assumed she already knew why. The grades. The disappointing report card. Another lecture. Another reminder. But then, the counselor said something unexpected. "That's not the main reason I'm calling." The words immediately changed the atmosphere. Grace sat a little straighter. Her heartbeat quickened. Questions flooded her mind. If it wasn't about grades, then what was it about? Had Lily gotten into trouble? Had something happened at school? The counselor's voice remained calm, gentle, careful. She requested a meeting on Monday, in person, with both mother and daughter. No further explanation. Just a quiet promise that the conversation couldn't happen over the phone. When the call ended, the house became silent again. Grace slowly lowered the receiver. For the first time since all of this began, certainty gave way to doubt. A small voice deep inside whispered a question she had refused to ask. What if I've been wrong? Night covered the house. Darkness settled over every room. Everyone appeared to be asleep. Everyone, except Lily. A small bedside lamp cast a warm glow across her desk. She reached beneath her bed once more. The notebook. The one that knew every secret she couldn't say aloud. Its pages had become the safest place in her world. She opened to a blank page. Her hands trembled. Slowly, she began to write. "They think my grades are the problem." A tear landed on the paper. The ink blurred. She continued anyway. "But nobody notices that I haven't smiled for months." The room fell silent except for the scratching of her pen. Then came another sentence. One she had never dared to speak out loud. "If Maya, Ethan, and Zoe hadn't stayed with me that day." She paused. Her breathing became uneven. Whatever had happened that day, it had changed everything. She finished the sentence. "I don't know what I would have done." Before she could write another word, footsteps echoed in the hallway. She quickly shut the notebook, slipped beneath the blanket, closed her eyes. Grace quietly entered the room. The anger from yesterday was gone. All that remained was exhaustion. She stood beside the bed and gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from Lily's face. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm only trying to protect you." Lily didn't move. She pretended to be asleep. But one silent tear escaped from the corner of her eye. Grace noticed it. She stared for a long moment. Something about that single tear unsettled her. It didn't look like teenage rebellion. It looked like pain. Real pain. She quietly walked out, closing the door behind her. The moment the latch clicked shut, Lily opened her eyes. She reached for the notebook and held it tightly against her chest, as though it were the only thing left that truly understood her. And in the darkness, she cried without making a sound, unaware that the truth she'd been hiding for months was finally beginning to surface. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and heavier hearts. The drive to school had been almost completely silent. Grace kept both hands tightly on the steering wheel. She wanted to ask Lily what the counselor meant.
She wanted to understand.
But every question seemed to get stuck in her throat. Beside her, Lily stared out the window, watching buildings pass by without really seeing them. Neither of them knew that this meeting would change everything. The counselor's office was designed to make students feel safe. Warm lighting, comfortable chairs, certificates neatly displayed on the walls, shelves filled with books about hope, healing, and resilience. Yet despite the welcoming room, the tension was impossible to ignore. Grace sat upright, determined to solve what she believed was an academic problem. Lily sat beside her, shoulders hunched, twisting the sleeve of her oversized hoodie until her fingers turned pale. Ms. Carter welcomed them with a gentle smile. She had spent months watching Lily slowly disappear behind forced smiles and silent tears. She knew this conversation had been waiting far too long. Grace wasted no time explaining the changes she had already made. The phone was gone. The friends were gone. The distractions were gone. She genuinely believed she had done everything a good mother should. Ms. Carter listened quietly. Then she gently redirected the conversation. "Mrs. Johnson, I'd like us to talk about something other than grades." Grace frowned. If not grades, then why were they there? The counselor slowly opened a folder. Inside wasn't a report card. It wasn't a list of missing assignments. It was something much harder to read. A record of a young girl quietly falling apart. Over the past several months, teachers had noticed Lily withdrawing. The student who once eagerly raised her hand had become almost invisible. She stopped joining classroom discussions. She stopped laughing with classmates. She often sat alone until her friends insisted she join them. And, perhaps most heartbreaking of all, she had visited the counselor's office several times.
Not to talk, not to complain.
Simply to sit in silence. Grace slowly turned toward her daughter. For the first time, she realized she had been measuring Lily's performance without noticing Lily's pain. Silence can speak louder than words. Ms. Carter turned toward Lily with kindness instead of pressure. She wanted Lily to know she didn't have to force herself to speak before she was ready. Healing couldn't be rushed. Grace, however, struggled to understand. If things had become this serious, why hadn't anyone told her? The counselor answered softly, "Because Lily begged us not to." Those words landed like a stone in Grace's chest. She stared at her daughter in disbelief. Lily had been protecting a secret, not from strangers, from her own mother. Grace's voice trembled as she asked why. Lily slowly lifted her head. Tears gathered in her eyes. "I didn't want to disappoint you." The room fell silent again. Grace's heart shattered. Every sacrifice she'd made, every extra shift, every sleepless night, had always been for Lily. How could her daughter possibly believe she would disappoint her? Without thinking, Grace reached for Lily's hand. It was instinct, a mother's attempt to comfort her child. But Lily gently pulled away. Not out of anger, not out of disrespect, but because months of emotional distance cannot disappear in a single moment. Grace froze. That tiny movement hurt more than any accusation ever could. For the first time, she wondered how long Lily had been carrying this burden alone.
Sometimes.
The hardest conversations require a moment to breathe. Grace stepped into the hallway, trying to steady herself. Questions raced through her mind. Had she missed signs? Had she mistaken sadness for laziness? Had she been looking at report cards when she should have been looking at her daughter? As she leaned against the wall, 3 familiar faces caught her attention.
Maya.
Ethan and Zoe, the very teenagers she had blamed for everything. They immediately stood when they saw her. Nervous, respectful, unsure of how she would react. Grace's first instinct was still suspicion. Why were they here? Hadn't she made herself clear? Then Ethan quietly explained. They had asked Ms. Carter if they could come. Not to argue, not to defend themselves, but because there were things Lily couldn't bring herself to say. Grace looked from one teenager to another. Confusion slowly replaced frustration. Maya took a shaky breath. Her voice was barely steady enough to speak. "Because Lily won't tell you." Those 5 words carried the weight of months of silence. The counselor led everyone into an empty classroom where interruptions wouldn't find them. The room was quiet. Desks stood neatly arranged. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. Yet no one noticed the peaceful surroundings. Every heart in that room carried something heavy. Ms. Carter gently reminded the 3 friends to share only what Lily had given them permission to reveal. Maya nodded. Then she turned toward Grace. What she said next changed the entire story. "The grades didn't start dropping because we became friends."
She paused.
Then continued. "We became friends because the grades started dropping." Grace blinked in confusion. Everything she believed, everything she'd built her decisions upon, suddenly felt uncertain. Ethan stepped forward. He remembered the first signs. Lily sitting alone during lunch, avoiding eye contact, leaving class as quickly as possible, trying to disappear. Zoe remembered something different. She remembered Lily's smile.
Bright. Warm.
The kind of smile that made everyone around her feel welcome. Then one day, without warning, that smile disappeared. No one in the room spoke for several seconds. Because everyone knew the next part would explain everything. Some wounds leave bruises. Others leave silence. Lily slowly stood. Her knees trembled beneath her. For months, she had carried a story she believed no one wanted to hear.
Today,
She finally found the courage to tell it. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Someone had created a fake social media account using her photograph. They edited her pictures, wrote cruel lies beneath them, shared them with classmates. Within days, the rumors spread faster than the truth ever could. Students she'd never spoken to suddenly knew her name. Or, at least, the version of her the internet had invented. Laughter echoed behind her as she walked through hallways. Conversations stopped whenever she passed. Whispers followed her from classroom to classroom. Every glance began to feel like judgment. Every smile felt suspicious. She no longer knew who she could trust. She reported the account. Eventually, it was removed. But the damage remained. Screenshots don't disappear simply because a page is deleted. The words continued to circulate. The humiliation continued. And little by little, the confident girl everyone once knew began disappearing behind fear. Grace could barely remain standing. Her daughter had been carrying unimaginable pain, only a few feet away from her. Every single day, she asked the question every parent hopes they'll never need to ask. Why didn't you tell me? Lily laughed softly through her tears. Not because anything was funny, but because the answer hurt. She looked directly into her mother's eyes, perhaps for the first time in months, because every conversation we had became about my grades. Those words echoed through the classroom. Grace felt every sentence like another crack in her heart. Lily continued. She had wanted to tell her so many times. After school, during dinner, on the drive home. She had rehearsed the words countless times. But before she could speak, the questions always came. How was your test? Did you finish your homework? Why are your marks dropping? Each question reminded Lily that success mattered. She began believing her feelings didn't. Finally, she whispered the sentence that broke everyone in the room. You never ask if I was okay. Time seemed to stop. Grace covered her mouth. The tears she'd fought so hard to hide finally fell. She realized something heartbreaking. She had spent months trying to protect Lily's future, while completely missing her present. Maya stepped forward, not with anger, not with blame, only with compassion. She wanted Grace to understand. None of them had been encouraging Lily to neglect school. They had simply refused to let her suffer alone. Ethan remembered walking Lily between classes because crowds made her anxious. Zoe remembered inviting her to lunch every single day, even when Lily insisted she wasn't hungry. Maya remembered spending hours making Lily laugh, just so she could forget the cruel comments for a little while. Then, she reached into her backpack. Carefully, she removed a small glass jar. It was decorated with colorful paper hearts. Simple, handmade, filled with love. She handed it to Grace. A small label wrapped around the glass read, "Reasons we love Lily." Grace's hands trembled as she opened it. She unfolded the first note. You always make other people feel included. Another, your kindness makes bad days easier. Another, thank you for staying alive long enough to become our friend. Grace stopped breathing. The room became unbearably still. Her eyes lifted slowly toward Lily. Confusion,
Fear.
and a terrible realization began settling into her heart. Her voice barely escaped her lips. What does this mean? No one answered. No one needed to. The silence itself carried the answer. Lily closed her eyes. Tears streamed freely down her face. For the first time, Grace understood that this story had never been about failing grades. It had always been about a daughter silently fighting a battle she never knew existed. The classroom was so quiet. It almost felt as though time itself had stopped. No one moved. No one spoke. Grace stood frozen, her trembling hands clutching the small glass jar. Just moments earlier, it had seemed like a simple gift between friends.
Now,
It had become something much more. One tiny folded note had shattered everything she believed she knew. Thank you for staying alive long enough to become our friend. She read the sentence again, then again. Each time, the words became heavier. Her voice trembled as she asked the question no parent ever imagines asking. What does this mean? Across the room, Lily stood by the window, unable to look at anyone. Her breathing grew shallow. Her hands shook uncontrollably. For months, she had buried memories she hoped would never have to be spoken aloud. Not because she wanted to hide them forever, but because saying them out loud would make them real. Beside her, Maya gently rested a hand on her shoulder. No pressure,
No expectations.
just quiet reassurance. The same reassurance she had offered countless times before. Lily closed her eyes, took a slow, trembling breath, then finally spoke. There had been a night when she believed everyone else's life would be easier if she simply disappeared. The words echoed through the room like a storm. Grace felt the ground disappear beneath her. Her knees weakened. She grabbed the nearest desk before she collapsed.
No.
She whispered over and over, as though denying the words could somehow erase them. But Lily continued. There had been a time when she wasn't making plans for university or dreaming about her future. Instead, she lay awake wondering whether anyone would even notice if she never woke up again. No mother is ever prepared to hear those words, and no amount of strength could stop Grace from breaking. Grace looked at her daughter through tear-filled eyes, not as a struggling student, not as someone with disappointing grades, but as her little girl, the same little girl she'd held when she took her first steps, the same little girl she'd promised to protect forever. Her voice cracked beneath the weight of unbearable guilt. "Why didn't you come to me?" Lily's answer came with heartbreaking honesty. "I tried." Grace froze. She listened as Lily slowly counted the moments she had almost reached out. One night, she had walked into her mother's room hoping for comfort. Grace had been exhausted after work. She hadn't meant to ignore her daughter. She had simply asked, "Can it wait until tomorrow?" Tomorrow never came. Another day, Lily admitted school had become difficult. Grace believed she was encouraging resilience. She responded, "Every teenager says that. Just focus on your books." To Grace, those words had been ordinary. To Lily, they felt like another closed door. Eventually, she stopped knocking. Not because she no longer needed her mother, but because she no longer believed she would be heard. Sometimes, relationships don't break because people stop loving each other. They break because one person stops believing it's safe to speak. Grace slowly turned toward the 3 teenagers she had blamed for everything. For the first time, she didn't see distractions. She saw children. Children who had quietly carried responsibilities no teenager should ever have to carry. With tears streaming down her face, she asked a simple question. "Was it you? Were you the ones who stayed with her?" Maya nodded. She remembered the late-night phone call. Lily had been crying so hard she could barely speak. Without hesitation, Maya asked her own mother to drive across town. She refused to let her friends spend that night alone. Ethan spoke next. He remembered staying awake until nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. They barely talked. Sometimes they simply sat together on a video call in silence, because silence felt less frightening when someone shared it with you. Then Zoe smiled through tears. Every single morning before school, she sent Lily exactly one message. The same message. Every day, Grace softly asked what it was. Zoe answered with heartbreaking simplicity. "Did you make it through the night?" Grace could no longer hold herself together. Every tear she had buried burst free. While she had been sleeping peacefully, these 3 teenagers had been quietly making sure her daughter was still alive. Slowly, Grace walked toward Lily. Each step felt impossibly heavy. She stopped several feet away, not because she didn't want to hug her daughter, but because she no longer believed she had earned that right. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to be completely vulnerable. "I don't deserve forgiveness." The words hung quietly in the room. Grace placed the little glass jar on a nearby desk. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She admitted the truth she had spent months refusing to see. She had believed she was protecting Lily's future. All the while, Lily had been fighting simply to survive the present. Then, unable to carry the weight of her guilt any longer, Grace fell to her knees. Everyone in the room stood frozen. No one expected it. Her tears came without restraint. She apologized again and again. She confessed something that would stay with her forever. "I saw your report card, but I didn't see my daughter." Those words pierced every heart in the classroom. She turned toward Maya, toward Ethan,
Toward Zoe.
Instead of thanking the people who had refused to abandon Lily, she had pushed them away. And now, she understood the terrible mistake she had made. One by one, Grace faced each teenager, not as children standing before an adult, but as heroes standing before a grateful mother. She apologized to Maya, the friend who answered a desperate phone call without hesitation. She thanked Ethan, the young man who sacrificed sleep simply to make sure Lily wasn't alone with her thoughts. She thanked Zoe, the friend whose daily message had become a quiet lifeline. Did you make it through the night? Such a simple question. Yet, sometimes, the simplest questions save lives. The three friends looked at one another before speaking. None of them wanted praise. None of them wanted recognition. They had never tried to replace Grace. They only wanted Lily to have enough love to keep going. Maya quietly explained they had never wanted Lily to choose between her family and her friends. Ethan gently reminded Grace of something she desperately needed to hear. She loves you. Even after everything. Even after months of feeling unseen. Lily had defended her mother whenever anyone criticized her. Grace turned toward her daughter in disbelief. Even after everything? Lily smiled through tears. You're still my mom. In that moment, Grace realized love had never disappeared. It had simply been buried beneath misunderstanding. A little while later, the group returned to Ms. Carter's office. No one pretended everything was suddenly fixed. Healing doesn't happen because tears are shed. It happens because people choose to keep showing up after the tears have dried. Ms. Carter reminded them that trust isn't rebuilt with promises alone. It grows through consistent actions, through listening, through patience, through choosing each other again. Every single day, Grace nodded quietly. For perhaps the first time in her life, she admitted she didn't have all the answers. She didn't fully understand what Lily needed, but she was willing to learn. Lily studied her mother's face carefully. The anger was gone. The disappointment had disappeared. All she saw now was regret and genuine love. She smiled softly before speaking. I don't need you to be perfect. After a long pause, she added the only thing she'd truly wanted all along. I just need you to listen. Grace nodded immediately, not because she wanted the conversation to end, but because she finally understood where it needed to begin. That evening, the Johnson home felt different. The walls hadn't changed. The furniture remained exactly where it had always been. Yet something inside the house had shifted. For the first time in months, silence no longer felt cold. Grace walked into the kitchen. Resting on the counter was Lily's phone. The very phone she had taken away believing she was protecting her daughter. She picked it up slowly, walked toward Lily, and gently placed it back into her hands. Not as a reward, but as an apology. Her voice was soft, filled with humility. She admitted she never should have taken away the people who had helped Lily survive her darkest days. Lily looked down at the phone, then back at her mother, almost afraid to believe what she was hearing. Grace smiled through tearful eyes. Invite your friends over. Lily stared in disbelief. For the first time in months, hope felt real again. Grace quietly admitted something else. If anyone deserved an apology, it was the three teenagers who had protected her daughter when she didn't even know protection was needed. Then, something happened that hadn't happened in a very long time. Lily smiled. Not the practiced smile she wore to hide her pain. Not the polite smile she forced through heartbreak. A real smile. One that reached her eyes. Mother and daughter stepped toward each other. And without another word, they embraced. Neither wanted to let go, because both of them understood something precious. Sometimes the strongest families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones willing to rebuild together. One conversation, one apology, and one act of love at a time. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.